There's a word. Yeah. It's your security. Yeah, security. Your guarantee. So he asked for the women, and Muhammad radiallahu anhu says, "You're one of the best looking men in Medina. You think we'll let you have our women?" Right? So here he's like playing on his vanity. So he says, "Then your children." He said, "What do you think it's going to look like for us when the Arabs start saying Muhammad bin Maslama mortgaged his children for 2 wasaq of wheat?" Right? Look bad. So they make an agreement, and he tells them they're going to meet them that night. So he goes, he's in bed with his wife, and he hears them calling. And his wife says, "What's going on?" And he said, "Don't worry, it's Muhammad bin Maslama." And she said, No, there's something going on, because you're muharab, and what are they doing at night? So she's alert to it, that something's going on. He said, No. And then he said, "Anyway, إِذَا دُعِيتُ إِلَى طَعْنَةً لَأَجَبْتُ." You know, in other words, his ubbaha, his pride says, even if I was calling to get stabbed, I have to answer. So he goes out, and they take him, and they're walking, and he's put on musk, and they're walking along, and they're talking, they're walking back and forth, discussing things, and then one of them says, and he has his sword, Ka'b, and he's a strong man, and one of them says, "That's incredible scent. I've never smelled anything that good. Can I smell your head?" And so this is vanity again, right? So he takes off his helmet, and he puts down his thing, boom, and he kills him. And that's the end of Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf. So obviously Bani Nadir is furious, right? And they go to the Prophet ﷺ, and they say, he was killed treacherously. And the Prophet ﷺ said, he made an oath with us, he broke the oath, and so he was punished for it. And this again is a warning, and it's also the nature, one of the things about that the Prophet's character and behavior teaches us. You have to see the Prophet ﷺ as a prophet, but also as a leader of a government. He actually has a city now. This is a city-state that he is leading. And so you cannot, by the nature of governance, cannot allow certain things to happen without serious punishment. Because if you do, then it leads to anarchy, and it leads to people taking advantage. And so the Prophet ﷺ, although the dominant characteristic is rahmah, you'll see that he will show his just side, his adala, when it's necessary only. In times when it's not necessary, he is always going to forgive. But in times when it's necessary, and these are times of war, these people, I mean, he has an entire community now that their security and their lives are based on his judgments and his decisions. And he sees the treachery that's going on, and he has to stop it. And so he lets them know, this is a message to Bani Nadir. If you make oaths and then you break them, then this is your reward, because this is khiyana. And the Arabs know this, because these are Jewish Arabs, right? They're Arab in that they've grown up in Arabia, they're speaking Arab, they're Arabized Jews. They know how the desert works, and they know what khiyana is, because this is the worst thing for the Arabs, is khiyana. It's a terrible thing. And so the next events that he makes mention of here is some death and some marriage. Obviously, Ruqayya, rahimahullah, who dies, and she's married to Uthman. Now, one of the things that's important, a hukm shar'i here, is when Ruqayya died, the women were weeping, and Umar wanted to stop them. And the Prophet ﷺ said, let them weep, because Allah does not take you into account for the eye or for the heart. In other words, for grief and for tears. What He takes you into account for is speaking. And this is why it's prohibited in Sharia to wail, walwala, like what some of the women do, bawaki, and ripping and tearing, this type of thing. And actually there were women in their culture that were paid to do that. It was a job. I mean, there's a lot of ways to make a buck, and that was one of them in that culture. And there's people in this culture that do bizarre stuff like that, right? I mean, there are people that are paid to escorts, these type things, that are paid to, just go on a date with somebody. So they had people that did that and wept for people. And now another big event is Sayyidina Umar and Abu Bakr both asked for the hand of Fatima. And this is the jewel, the prize of Medina, the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ. Fatima is stunningly beautiful. She's the beloved daughter of the Prophet ﷺ. And, I mean, it's enough that she's Fatima. They say, the Munshid says, Hiya ummu man, Hiya zawju man, Hiya bintu man. Right? Who is she the mother of? Who is she the wife of? And who is she the daughter of? Right? I mean, and what more, right? She's the mother of Hassan and Hussein, she's the wife of Sayyidina Ali, and she's the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ. So, Fatima is something amazing. And they both propose. Now, Abu Bakr is the closest person to the Prophet, and he's also married to the daughter of Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr is turned down. Umar's turned down. And according to the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ actually said that he was commanded to give Fatima in marriage to Sayyidina Ali. And this is part of the Ahl-al-Bayt, because all of the family of the Prophet are going to come, the Sadat will all come from Hassan and Hussein, who are the result of that marriage. Now, a couple of one, it's very beautiful. Sayyidina Ali is a water carrier. That's how he's making his money. He goes out and gets water from the wells for people's houses. Right? So he has no money, and he actually, Uthman gives him something for a dowry. But he doesn't have any money. And then he's also given some camels. And he doesn't mention this story, but it's one of the reasons why alcohol is prohibited. Sayyidina Ali has these 2 camels for his walima. And you can imagine he's 20 years old. He's about to marry Fatima. He's probably in a state of ecstasy. And he goes and he puts down his 2 camels. And Hamza is in a hanut, which is a bar. And he's probably celebrating a little bit after Badr too. And he's listening to a qaina sing. And one of these camels defecates. And the smell starts coming in. And she sings to Hamza. Is Hamza one to let a camel spoil this environment? And so Hamza, he's a little drunk. He goes out and he takes his sword and he cuts the 2 humps of the camels off, and he puts his hands in between them, jumps between them, and pulls out their kidneys. Sayyidina Ali comes, and there's his wedding feast, right? And he goes in and he sees Sayyidina Hamza and blood on his hands, and so he goes to the Prophet ﷺ. He tells him what happened. The Prophet ﷺ goes in and he says to Hamza, "What did you do?" And Hamza, he's drunk. He doesn't know what he's saying. He looks at the Prophet and he says, وَهَلْ أَنْتُمْ إِلَّا عَبِيدُ آبَائِنَا? Are you anything other than the servants of our fathers? So this is a Jahiliyyah boast. And the Prophet, when he hears that, he leaves the room. And he goes. And then the ayahs came down about the khamr. That's one of the reasons that was done. So, but that doesn't spoil the wedding nonetheless. But he just mentions, that they bring sand to put on make the floor nice from the riverbed. They have a sheepskin, a striped cloth from Yemen, a pillow stuffed with leather cushioned palm fibers, And then they even have dates and figs to put before. I mean, look at the simplicity of these people. And this is the wedding of the Prophet's daughter, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you look now at how people have weddings, right? Spending millions of dollars in some places, literally, in the Muslim countries. And this is the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the daughter of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the wedding is so simple. And another thing about the Prophet, the Prophet did make mu'akha with Ali, Sayyidina Ali. When he made mu'akha between the Ansar and the Muhajirin, he took Sayyidina Ali as his brother. And they were both Muhajir, so it's a very significant event. Now, another thing that happens is Hafsa's daughter, Hafsa, the daughter of Umar, her husband Khunais dies, and he had immigrated to Abyssinia. And so Hafsa now, she's 18, she's also a very beautiful woman, and she is, Omar offers Sayyidina Abu Bakr Hafsa, and Abu Bakr says no. Now this is obviously, for Sayyidina Omar, that's upsetting, because Hafsa is his prized daughter, and he goes to Abu Bakr. And then he goes to Sayyidina Uthman. Sayyidina Uthman says no. Now Omar is really upset about this. He goes to the Prophet ﷺ and he says, I can't believe this. I offer Abu Bakr and Uthman, they both turn me down. He thinks he's done something wrong. And the Prophet ﷺ said to him, I will show you a better son-in-law than those two, right? And then he says, and I will also show them a better father-in-law than you. And so Omar, as sagacious as he is, understands the meaning, because what the Prophet had told Abu Bakr and Uthman, that he was planning on proposing Hafsa. And so they couldn't, because they obviously would have married her, but they couldn't now, because it's the Prophet ﷺ has already told them. So they both say that they won't do that. And then he understands also that he's going to give the hand of Zainab to Sayyidina Uthman, and the reason for that, or Kulthum radiallahu anha, and then he becomes known as Dhun Nurayn, Sayyidina Uthman, the possessor of two lights, because he had Ruqayya and he had Kulthum radiallahu anha. And then he obviously, now it's really important, he points out this, and it's actually very true. Hafsa comes into the household. One would think Aisha now she has only just come into the household, right? Aisha came in just at this same time. And Aisha is still very young. Sauda is much older. So Aisha can't really relate to Sauda in other than a mother-daughter type relationship. Hafsa is very young. So she comes in and they actually bond. And they will become very close. And there's, they have their adventures together. But they actually become very close. And so there's no disharmony in this event of marrying Hafsa. Now another really important event happens, and that is the death of Uthman ibn Mad'un, who was one of the leading, he was a very up-and-coming member of Quraysh. And he became Muslim, as we remember early on. He was one of the closest people to the Prophet. The Prophet ﷺ loved this man deeply, and he was known to be Azhadul Sahaba. He was the most ascetic of all the Sahaba. One of the famous stories about him was his wife actually went to the Prophet ﷺ, his wives, wearing really poor clothes and in a real state. And they asked her what was wrong, and she said, Naharahu sa'im wa layluhu qa'im. He just fasts all day and he prays all night. Right? So this is like a darwish. She's complaining that this is somebody who's completely disengaged from the world. And so the Prophet ﷺ actually calls him and says, أَلَكُمْ فِيَ قُدْوَةٌ? Am I an example for you? And he said, جَعَلْتُ فِدَاءَكَ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ, I'm your ransom. You're my qudwa. And he says, إِنِّي أَصُومُ أُفْطِرُ وَإِنِّي أَنَامُ وَأَقُومُ. I fast and I break my fast, and I sleep and I pray. وَإِنَّ لِجَسِكَ عَلَيْكَ حَقًّا, and your body has a right over you. وَإِنَّ لِأَهْلِكَ عَلَيْهَا حَقًّا, and your wife has a right over you. Right? So all Uthman then, the next time he's seen, he's actually wearing nicer clothes and some scent. But he's obviously doing this not because he wants to, that he's just doing what the Prophet told him, and his wife is actually very happy too, because now he's fulfilling his obligations to his wife as well. Another thing, he was very close friends with Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira. They were very close. And he said that the reason that he became Muslim was because the Prophet ﷺ used to constantly come to him, وَيُلَحْوَ عَلَيْهِ. He would tell him, become Muslim, become Muslim. And he said, I finally got to the point where I was too ashamed of seeing him like this, coming to me, wanting me to... So I just told him, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. And then he said, but one day I was with him and he recited, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ وَإِيتَاءِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنكَرِ وَالْبَغْيِ يَعِظُكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ. And he said, اسْتَقَرَّ الْإِيمَانِ فِي قَلْبِهِ. When he heard those ayahs, Allah commands to justice and ihsan and forgiveness and giving and kinship bonds, وَإِيتَاءِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى, and he prohibits fahsha and munkar, evil things, and then Allah, He's exhorting you that perhaps you might remember. He said that when he heard those ayats, Iman came into his heart and he wanted to go tell Al-Walid. And part of the reason was the eloquence of the ayahs is extraordinary. I mean, the whole Quran is eloquent, but there are certain ayahs, obviously, that are these kind of comprehensive. They contain so many meanings in them, and this is one of those verses. So he went to Al-Walid and he said, you have to hear this. And so he recites to Al-Walid the ayahs, and he said, Idha, which is what the Jahili Arabs said when they heard a good line of poetry that they really appreciated. And they still say that. The Arabs do that. If the poet is giving, they'll say, Id, right? And so he repeats it again, and he said, Inna laha la halawa, wa inna alayha la talawa. These words have a sweetness, and they're embellished. And then he said, وَإِنَّ أَسْفَرَهَا لَمُورِقٌ. And the bottom part of these words brings forth beautiful foliage. وَإِنَّ أَعْلَاهُ لَمُثْمِرٌ. And the height of these words is fruitful. And then he says, لَيْسَ هَذَا كَلَامُ الْبَشَرِ. This isn't the words of a human being. And he almost became Muslim, and obviously he's told by Abu Jahl and others that he's being bewitched. So he never does. The other thing about Uthman radiallahu anhu, when he was buried, and he points this out, the Prophet actually went to him and kissed him when he was lying in state. He went and kissed him, and then he said, Ya Uthman, ma asabta dunya wa ma asabat ad-dunya minka. You didn't touch the dunya, and the dunya never touched you. And then his wife, when she saw that, she said, Hani'an ya Aba Sa'ib. His name was Abu Sa'ib. He said, Hani'an ya Aba Sa'ib, al-Jannah. And the Prophet looked at her and he said, Ma ilmuka bihada. You know, where'd you get that knowledge? Ma ilmuki bihada. Where'd you get that knowledge? And he said, بِحَسْبِكِ إِنْ قُدْتِ كَانَ يُحِبُّ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولُهُ. He said, where did you get that knowledge? And he said, Ya Rasulullah, كَانَ يَصُومَ النَّهَارِ وَيَقُومَ اللَّيْلِ. He used to fast all day and he'd pray at night. And the Prophet said, it's enough for you just to say he loved Allah and His Messenger. And this is an important lesson, because what the Prophet ﷺ was teaching here is that we do not say about Allah what we don't know. And this is really important. Anybody that we do not say anybody other than who Allah and His Messenger have said is in paradise. We hope that people are in paradise, and we have a good opinion, and many of our scholars and our martyrs and our righteous people have been seen after their death by many of their companions and other people in paradise, giving them bushra. So, and we should believe that, like Imam Nawawi, Imam al-Ghazali, Ibn Hajar, and hopefully our relatives who are Muslim and these things, we should believe that and have a good opinion of Allah. But we don't say what we don't know. And that's why only Allah and His Messenger can tell us who is in paradise and who's in hell. No one else can make that.
Can you please tell me the surah and the ayat number that you said?
About what?
About Usman bin brother.
Oh, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ.
No, the other one that was justice and
Yeah, that one.
What surah number?
Do you know which? Inshallah, maybe somebody could find it. Now, another thing that he mentions, which is important also, is that Umar, when Uthman ibn Mad'un died, Umar said he actually fell in his estimation. Because he said Uthman was such an extraordinary Muslim, he didn't understand why he didn't die martyr, shaheed. And so he just said he fell in his estimation. Now, Umar admits later on when the Prophet and then Abu Bakr sallallahu alaihi wasallam, neither of them died on the battlefield. Sayyidina Umar realized, he said it was stupid of him to think that, because even the best of creation didn't die on the battlefield. In other words, that the shaheed's death, the martyr's death, doesn't necessarily mean that it's somebody who dies. There are people who die martyred in their beds. Right? It's verse 90 in Surah An-Nahl. Now the next are the people of the bench that he mentioned, and this is important because the Ahl Sufa were people, some say it's where the word Sufi comes from, but it's a weak derivation. These were people of the bench, Ahl Sufa. And these people, many of them were what we would call now like refugees. People that had either were impoverished when they migrated to Medina, they didn't have any place to stay. They were like homeless people. And the Prophet ﷺ took them in and put them in an area in the masjid. It's actually, if people know the present day masjid, the original Ottoman masjid is like this. The Prophet's masjid, the original one, was about like this. The Rawda is here, and the houses of the Prophet ﷺ are here. And this is where you visit the Prophet ﷺ's grave. The Mihrab is here, Bab al-Salam is here, and the Mimbar is here of the Prophet, and his original Mihrab was here. The Sufa were in the back of his houses here. And there's a raised place now in the masjid where you can see that. And these people, they sometimes were about 70 people. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu was amongst them. Many of the actually big Sahaba were amongst them. And these people, they basically were supported by the Prophet ﷺ. He would actually give them food. Whenever he got food, he would send food to them. There's a wonderful story of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. Once the Prophet ﷺ was given some milk, and Abu Hurairah brought it, and Abu Hurairah said, the Prophet said, "Go bring the people of Sufa." And Abu Hurairah said, he thought to himself, "I'll never get to drink any of this," because he realized he's the one carrying it, so he's going to be the last one to get some. And so he calls the Sufa people, and he he offers it, and not only does each one drink, but the Prophet tells them, drink, keep drinking till you're full. Every single one of them drank till they were full, and then it got to Abu Hurairah, and the Prophet said, drink. And he drank, and he said, drink. And he kept drinking, and finally he said, Ya Rasulullah, I can't, there's no more room. So they were amazing people. Ibn Abi Jamrah says that the Ahl Sufa is a proof that in healthy Muslim communities you will have ubad that are supported by the community, and really what they're there to do is to study and to worship and to be a spiritual support for the community. And even though this is an anathema in modern Islam, because there's a lot of modern Muslims that are very opposed to this idea, and they often quote the hadith of Sayyidina Umar, who once walked into a masjid and found a man worshipping there, and he said, who supports you? And he said, Akhi. And he said, Akhuka khayrun minka. Your brother's better than you. And that traditionally was always interpreted by the scholars, that what Umar was telling him was, don't become deluded, because you've been given this opportunity to worship Allah and somebody's willing to support you, because your brother not only gets the reward of the worship that you do, but also he gets the reward of supporting you and the reward of whatever else he's doing. So he's better than you. Right? Umar didn't chase him out and say haram and go get a job, and right. So that's what these people were doing. Many of them actually end up becoming very wealthy. Salman al-Farisi was amongst them, and he actually wept on his deathbed. And one of the Sahaba asked him, "Why are you weeping?" And he said, "When we were at the Sufa, we took an oath with the Prophet that we would never take more from this world than just what a rider needs." And he said, "And I feel like I've broken that oath, and I'm ashamed to meet the Prophet in the Akhirah." And they said when he died, he had like a handful of dirhams, a wudu pot, and a few other possessions. Yeah. So the bench was an amazing place. These people were also, many of them become great scholars as well. Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu is amongst them. Abu Hurairah is amongst them. Ibn Mas'ud is really almost like a family member. And some of these people were like that. Abu Dhar al-Ghifari is there. And they were often hungry as well. And Abu Hurairah actually mentions, he said sometimes they would see us roll, the other Sahaba would see them rolling around thinking they were having fits of epilepsy. And he said it was just, we were so hungry, we were just trying to get rid of the hunger pangs. Now another really important event also, Anas is given by Sulaym to the Prophet ﷺ as a servant in his house. And Anas will become one of the greatest scholars of the Sahaba and of Islam. So he actually, this is obviously a divine, everything that's happening is for reasons, but Anas coming into the house is an important event. And then also, Sayyidina Ali, who's married now to Fatima. Fatima is working, and Sayyidina Ali is working. Fatima works grinding corn and selling it for the houses in Medina, and Sayyidina Ali is working, and her hands become very blistered and calloused, and so Sayyidina Ali says, "Go," because the Prophet has servants. He says, "Go and ask the Prophet ﷺ for a servant for us." And so she goes and asks the Prophet ﷺ. She actually goes in and she feels too ashamed